Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and I am ill in that I have a chronic condition, but maybe all these flare-ups making me sick aren't insulin-resistant PCOS. Maybe it's actually all those gosh darn books I've been reading. Novels, specifically. They're the ones that'll get you. At least according to this 200-year-old article we're going to be discussing today. I was watching Abby Cox's video on belladonna and the use of it and the myths around it, and she brought up this one specific source that talked about it, about how women would use it to make their pupils bigger, supposedly. But she pointed out that this was kind of an iffy source, judging by the fact that the very next article in it says nervous and other diseases caused by novel reading. And the second I heard that title, I had to know. I needed to know what I am falling ill with because, not to flex, but also kind of to flex. As of filming this, I have read 126 books this year and I don't intend on slowing down. So who knows? Maybe I'm just making myself sick all the time. Oh, and I will have a link down below if you want to read this delightful thing for yourselves. Now, as I read through this in full, we will be discussing a little bit more details outside of the article itself because I desperately need a reason to use my multiple degrees that I am still paying off, but aren't being used for my job. But yes, I have a bachelor's degree in history, a public history certificate, and a master's degree in museum studies. And I'm working in special education. Moving on. Also, another side note, I keep calling it like a booklet or a pamphlet. This thing is actually pretty chunky. It's got like 500 pages. It just gives me like women's health pamphlet vibes. And I can't get past that. So, I'm sticking with it. Now, this article is in a booklet titled The Family Oracle of Health, Economy, Medicine, and Good Living, adapted to all ranks of society, from the palace to the cottage, published in 1824. Now, the more pedantic among you might be pointing out that I used the word Victorians in the title of this video, but technically, 1824 is pre-Victorian era. She did not take the throne until 1837, but SEO terms and historically accurate terms are not the same thing on the internet. There's a reason costubers still have to use the word corset when they actually mean stays to get any eyes on their stuff. But yes, this is technically pre-Victorian. She was alive at this point. She was like 4 or 5, but she was alive. However, technically this would be the Regency period. But, I mean, honestly, when we get into it, it does read very Victorian. Nervous and other diseases caused by novel reading. Every shallow philosopher and gossiping practitioner, be for example of Blank Street, exclaims against the debilitating effects of tea, and ignorantly ascribes it to the present great increase of nervous maladies. This we flatly deny, and demand unequivocal proof. But our shallow gossips never dreamed of so vulgar a thing as proof, and run into 1,000 foolish ninnyisms about nerves, narcotics, and hot water, to escape from a confession of sheer ignorance. We shall come to tea by and by, and also to the bad effects of music on the nerves, but in the meantime we hesitate not to declare that 2 of the main causes of the increase of those distressing complaints are to be traced to the apothecary shop and the circulating library. To the shop in the form of calomel, with which our children's nerves are destroyed in infancy, and in the form of draughts, etc., with which our stomachs are mercilessly drugged from childhood till death. To the library, in the form of interesting novels and fascinating tales that prey upon the nerves at their very source, and bring multiplied diseases in their train. As this subject is somewhat novel, it will require a closer detail. So to translate, they begin by calling out their ops, apparently B of Blank Street, censored for privacy reasons, was talking shit about tea and saying that tea was actually the reason for all of these new nervous maladies. Tea is actually bad for you, which is something I also drink a lot of. It's a bookworm stereotype for a reason, okay? Book with a cup of tea just hits different, but regardless, they also just like give a drive-by shot to music, which comes back later in the article, and I do believe is an article in here which I really should read at one point because they directly call out playing the flute, which is something I've just started lessons for this year. So maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm just stacking the diseases. Gotta catch them all. But you might be surprised to note that I actually have one really good point in here, and that's the note about calomel. Now, it sounds like a fancy apparently I can't speak modern words as well as I can speak the old ones. But regardless, calomel, despite sounding medicinal, was given to infants for teething, but it has mercury in it and was known even by this time to cause mercury poisoning. But they kept giving this mercury to babies. Sometimes I think it's a miracle our entire species has survived this long. So yes, correct. Call out the calomel. You get that one. That's a point for you, author of this. But it's also important to note that when they say the circulating library, that's not the library as we know it today. It was actually kind of like a ye old subscription service where you had to pay a fee either per book or annually to actually get the books to read. However, they were still way cheaper than what books costed back then because, keep in mind, this is pre-electricity. Mass production is still a whole huge thing. So it did still help spread novel reading among at least the middle class. The lower classes at this point were still dealing with rampant illiteracy. But yes, the circulating library helped increase novel reading at a much greater scale than had existed before, which is part of the reason those are getting called out specifically. But now, we must continue to understand what diseases we are giving ourselves with all this book reading. The influence of the mind in producing diseases of the body is well known. Depress the mind by fear or grief or despondency, and you most infallibly produce a ghastly train of nervous diseases, accompanied with disorders of the liver and the stomach. Now it is equally well known that novels, tales, and romances have the effect of agitating the reader's mind, both during and after the perusal, and the more interesting the work is, the more injurious is this effect. We have not a doubt, therefore, that the increased demand for the perusal of novels and tales is accountable for much of the prevalence of nervous disorders. Even were we to pass by the poring over them by the midnight lamp, and the consequent robbing of the brain of its healthful measure of sleep. Dr. Mason Good says he has had several patients of this description, ladies chiefly, who had spent their nights and days over captivating novels, till they gave evident proofs that they were of a mind occasionally deranged. In such cases, there are usually headaches, indigestion, costiveness, wandering nervous pains, flatulence, ringing in the ears, flushings in the face, alternate sensations of burning and coldness in the hands and feet, and all the numerous attendants of nervous derangement. So once again, I have to give it to them. They are correct in that severe mental stressors can cause physical maladies. My mother has told me the story of when her father ended up getting caught in a drug sting for being addicted to codeine and cough syrup, and it made the front page of the news because he was a pastor. She suddenly had all these new health issues that she'd never had before pop up out of nowhere. And so, yes, the idea that severe emotional stress can cause physical maladies is real. I don't know if it's specifically of the liver and stomach. I know sometimes when I get too big emotions, I can get nauseous, but I am curious about the idea of linking fictional stories with real grief. Maybe this is just me, but I've never actually had a story hit so hard that it exactly matched my real world negative emotions. But if you have, please let me know. I would love to know more about that. Now, this is saying that we are going to ignore the idea of not sleeping to read, staying up too late, poring over them by the midnight lamp and losing your healthful measure of sleep. They're saying even if you don't do that, there's still health issues. Now, our Dr. Mason Good, I believe, is a reference to John Mason Good, who is a doctor that would have been practicing at this time, and he was vehemently against what they were handing out in apothecary shops, so it does line up with some of this author's other beliefs. However, I couldn't really find anything any other sources to corroborate this one specifically. However, I was just using the internet. Maybe if I was like really at my historian A game and I was like going to places to look in archives, I could probably find more. But as far as I can tell, I don't have any written corroboration that he actually was anti-reading. But of course, we do have to talk about the misogyny of the thing, because it's women specifically suffering these things. Even setting aside the fact that women's maladies were always considered like their own fault because people didn't bother to learn how women's bodies work for ever. You know what it's like having PCOS? You understand exactly how much people don't research women's issues. Regardless, there's definitely a vibe of, oh, women are reading the silly books, because yes, this did still exist back then. Jane Austen actually references something like that in her book Northanger Abbey. So this has always been a thing. The books women like have always been derided because women loved them. I'm sorry for depressing you in this silly little video, but that's a thing. However, we gotta get on to the actual medical issues themselves. Alright, so a closer perusal of our many medical maladies of reading novels. Headaches, which, again, I low-key gotta give it to them. Okay, when I do a 24-hour readathon, I usually end the day with a whopper headache. Indigestion, costiveness, which to us would be constipation. Wandering nervous pains, flatulence, ringing in the ears, flushings in the face, alternate sensations of burning and coldness in the hands and feet, and the all numerous attendants of nervous derangement. Because apparently, circulatory issues mean you're deranged. Because when I first read alternate sensations of burning and coldness in the hands and feet, I was like, oh, that's just like when you're sitting too long, and then you get like the pins and needles feeling, or your hands get cold because you haven't been moving them and the blood flow dropped. Like, that's what that feels like to me, right? Am I crazy? Like, let me know if you have a different interpretation of that. But it's just so funny, like all of these horrible things ringing in the ears. I honestly don't think I've ever had that one reading. I can't really think of a time. I mean, even if I've had ringing in my ears are just a little bit wonky anyways. So like, I wouldn't count it as my nervous malady from reading. I do find the constipation, indigestion part funny, but we'll actually get a little bit more into that later. We first have to look into the cure. The first part of the cure is, of course, to give up novels for sober history, or, if that is not relished, the light inanities of certain periodical works will be less injurious to the nerves. We speak to invalids and those of weak constitutions who have brought on or augmented nervous complaints by poring for days and nights over the visions of romance. The robust, of course, require only to be cautioned that the most vigorous health may soon suffer by bad management, as the hardest rock insensibly gives way to the soft drops that frequent on it play. So the cure is, of course, to stop reading novels, switch to history, but if you really just want that fiction hit, to switch to periodicals. And it does sound like they're mocking periodicals, but like some classic works came out as periodicals, like the original Phantom of the Opera was periodically published. But they're especially saying that if you are an invalid or of a weak constitution, that you must be especially careful. And I don't know if they mean me, because most days I'm Gucci, but also I'm doing a lot and making a lot use of modern amenities to stay Gucci. So my guess is back in this day when there were no sugar alternatives and no birth control, they probably would have considered me a weak constitution, which makes those over 120 books apparently even worse. But even if you are robust, still watch it, because enough novel reading will do all that stuff to you too. But of course, it's not just not reading. No. We actually do have actual medicine you can take to cure your novel reading itis. When these directions do not produce any amendment within a few weeks, recourse must be had to treatment more strictly medical. The bowels must be opened with the laxative draught, page 172, and capsule by the dinner pills, page 84. And along with this, it will be extremely useful to employ the tonic draught for the nervous. Take 1 dessert spoonful of the tincture of Peruvian bark, 10 drops of aromatic elixir of vitriol, an ounce of pure water. Mix with sugar and ginger to taste for a draught 3 times a day. As this somewhat astringes the bowels, the dinner pills must be continued with it. Okay, so, Peruvian bark, still used for medicinal purposes today. We're cool there. Pure water, obviously fine. Elixir of vitriol. You may know the word vitriol as a modern adjective for things that are toxic and bad. And that's because vitriol is old-timey speak for sulfuric acid. This author was telling people reading bad, drink sulfuric acid 3 times a day. I'm taking back the it I gave them for the whole calomel thing. You don't get to say shit about the apothecary. But because sulfuric acid causes so many problems in your digestive tract, they do have a cure for that as well. When acid is felt in the stomach, known by heartburn, sour belchings, and flatulence, you may substitute for this the following. Draught for heartburn and flatulence. Take half a dram of the liquor of subcarbonate of potassium. I believe that is meant to be potassium bicarbonate. An ounce of the infusion of gentian, a dram of the tincture of cascarilla. Mix for a draught to be repeated as occasion requires. Now, thankfully, insofar as I can tell, these are all fine things. The second part is fine. These are all plants that are used for supplements or medicine. And while, there's the whole, how much does it really do type of vibe, it's at least not sulfuric acid. So, if you want to try that one out, go for it. But yeah, okay, let's finish this out. Oh, and in case you were wondering, I did check out the draughts and pills on the other pages that they recommended, and they seem more or less fine. At least they're not, sulfuric acid bad. And at this point, I'll take it. Another circumstance indispensable to the cure is going early to bed. Never, we should say, later than 10 o'clock, and rising early. That is, not later than 6 or 7 o'clock. And where the weather will permit, taking a walk or a ride of at least a mile before breakfast. If these directions are followed to the letter, and without this rigid compliance we can promise nothing, our patients who have brought on or aggravated nervous complaints by novel reading will, in most cases, recover in a month or 2. The pernicious effects of music on the nerves, and particularly continued practicing on the pianoforte, harp, violin, or flute, will form the subject of our next paper of this series. I literally did my flute practice right before I sat down to film this. The funniest part about that last paragraph is that actually is my bedtime. I usually go to bed somewhere between 9:30 and 10, and I get up at 6:30. I don't take a walk first thing in the morning. Not of a mile. I usually walk after work, but I'm doing that much right. The thing is, underneath all of this, the sulfuric acid, the nervous derangement, there actually was something new that was probably freaking them out because they had never faced it before, and that is the ill effects of a sedentary lifestyle. Because if you look at the time period this was written in, a sedentary lifestyle as like a regular occurrence just didn't exist for the vast majority of the population. This was an era in which doing your laundry was a whole to-do, day-long, on your feet, Herculean task. And even if you were someone that had the servants and the wherewithal to sit around and do nothing, you were literally doing nothing. There wasn't a lot of entertainment just sitting around at home all day. You wanted to hear music, you had to go to where the musicians were or host a ball to bring musicians in. If you wanted to see a show, you had to literally go to the theater. And even at home, doing something like handcrafts, your hands are going to tap out a lot sooner from a handcraft than from holding a book. At least that's true for me, but I also got some light nerve damage, so that might be specific to me. Regardless, sedentary lifestyles, aka sitting for long periods of time but not actually fully resting, do have negative health effects that do actually include digestive issues. It's not very clear how much it affects digestive issues as I was looking at some research on it, but yes, one of the positive effects of exercising is it will help with digestion, and it will also help with menstruation, BT dubs. To my other PCOS girlies, it will actually help. Still, this pamphlet wasn't really playing off of actual concerns. It was mostly aimed at women and aimed at terrifying them into giving up what was viewed as the silly women books. So I can't give it that much credit. And again, the whole sulfuric acid thing, I just cannot get past that. No. Regardless, if you would like me to continue doing this kind of thing, there's a whole pamphlet of weird stuff in here. You know, Abby Cox already did the one, but this was a series for several years, but only a few years, only 3. Can't imagine why. So I wouldn't mind looking into more of the quote-unquote advice that this series has to offer. So if you would like that, please let me know. I will delve further into the void. But more or less, you are safe from your novel reading hurting you. You know, except for when the author kills off your favorite character. I'm sorry that one author did that one time. I know it hurt you a lot. But also, take a walk sometimes. You know, just get up, shake out, stretch. Make sure to do the 20-20-20, where every 20 minutes you look at something 20 feet away for 20 seconds so you don't do what I did to my eyes. But thank you so much for being here. And with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.